If the Jedi had their own government that operated separate from the Galactic Republic, they would be free to operate outside of the politics that blinded them from the movements of the dark side. The Jedi Council would be able to focus their efforts on keeping peace in the galaxy. This would also give them clarity to recognize the promptings of the Force and perhaps be more aware of the growing darkness orchestrated by the Sith. This government would likely be ruled from the top down, with the Jedi Council ruling collectively. The Grand Master would not be the ultimate ruler, they would serve more as a designated spokesperson and facilitator of governing structures. Perhaps they would have some veto power, but ultimately there would be checks and balances that prevent one Jedi Master from having too much authority. This Jedi government would likely operate in a world important to the history of the Jedi. It would likely be a world where the Force is particularly strong. Tython would likely be an option for such a world, as it was rich in Jedi history and experienced a concentration of the Force. This was the planet that Grogu used the Seeing Stone to contact Luke in The Mandalorian. Tython would be made up of primarily Jedi citizens, but there would be some citizens who were not Jedi. They would be on Tython as refugees or people whose family needed a safe place to be. That being said, the population of Tython would not be large. In fact, to scale, the Jedi government would be very small compared to the Republic, which spans many worlds, or even the Confederacy of Independent Systems, which is emerging in our story. The Independent Jedi government was created after the war against the Sith Empire, after the Battle of Coruscant that took place 5,000 years before Episode 4. The Jedi decided to leave the Republic in favor of being better positioned to fight back should the darkness ever arise again. If this government existed, the events of the main canon timeline would likely have been very different, as Darth Sidious rose to power as the Chancellor of the Republic, largely because the Jedi were caught up in the politics of the Republic. This kept them from being able to accurately discern events within the will of the Force. The events leading to the discovery of Anakin Skywalker would have been very different, considering Qui-Gon Jinn discovered him on a mission directly relating to Republic politics. If you are not aware, the Trade Federation's blockade of Naboo was a political move orchestrated by Darth Sidious behind the scenes. The Jedi, being so ingrained within the Republic, dispatched Obi-Wan Kenobi and Qui-Gon Jinn to aid the Naboo. This led them to Tatooine and ultimately Anakin Skywalker. Anakin, being the chosen one, would have been discovered eventually, as I believe it was the will of the Force that Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan ended up on Tatooine of all places. However, his discovery would likely look much different. Let's imagine for our story it was Quinlan Vos who found him. After all, he was undercover on Tatooine around the time of Episode 1. He can even be seen in one scene watching Qui-Gon and his companions stroll through the streets of Mos Espa. But that kind of leaves us wondering, why would Quinlan pick Anakin out? Let me know in the comments below. Write out a scenario of Quinlan finding Anakin, but for now, we're going to move to the next part of our story. Because a major piece of Anakin's story in canon was his love for Padme, and the way Palpatine used that in his effort to manipulate Anakin to the dark side. If Anakin was found on Tatooine without meeting Padme and being brought back to Coruscant, several things would change in regards to his future. First, Anakin would not know and therefore not fall in love with Padme. We know from Attack of the Clones that he was fixated on her since day one. Not knowing Padme would eliminate a very key distraction for Anakin. Second, Anakin would not be unintentionally served up to Palpatine for him to groom the young boy into his apprentice eventually. A third consequence of this alternate timeline has to do with the Jedi's involvement in the war, as I believe they would play a more neutral side. If they chose the side of the Republic, it would be because they believed the Republic was the best chance at peace in the galaxy. They would certainly not become generals in the Republic's army, though some Jedi may be dispatched to help depending on the situation. I'd like to note that I think it's perfectly reasonable to imagine the Jedi Order, or this Jedi government, supporting the Separatists in the war, as they could sympathize with their desire to be independent of the Republic. So what we see so far is the Jedi Order is much more removed from the whole galaxy, or namely the political system, and they're likely in a better position to help people in need rather than serve the political system of the Republic. Since the Jedi seek to be guardians of peace and justice, they would still be active enough all over the galaxy when it comes to helping those in need. One of the things that stuck out about the High Republic era is the number of outposts the Order had spread throughout the galaxy. While the Jedi were still very involved in Republic politics during this era, they also had a strong presence around the galaxy as well. This is how I imagine the Jedi would be if they had their own government. It's worth mentioning that because they are not affiliated with the Republic, they would likely focus on the Outer Rim a little bit more than they typically did while under the Republic. With all of that taken into consideration, the events of the original timeline would unfold similarly in that Palpatine would still rise to power in effort to gain enough power to defeat the Jedi. Despite the Jedi not being intertwined in the Republic, it would still be his best avenue for bringing them down. Palpatine would rise to power and orchestrate a war of sorts. It would likely look similar. A war was the perfect tool to foster instability and uncertainty throughout the galaxy. With the Jedi so actively making a difference in the galaxy, characters like Dooku would not get frustrated with the Jedi's disillusionment. He would see that they're doing good. Also, Maul would likely still be Palpatine's long-term apprentice without a suitable replacement, and without the duel on Naboo to get in the way of that. This also means that Palpatine would need to find somebody else to be the face of the war, as he couldn't play Chancellor and Darth Sidious openly. And this role probably was not well tailored for Maul. Maul would continue to grow in power though, and become a valuable tool in Palpatine's plans though. The Sith apprentice would carry out his master's will in the shadows. Over time, his reputation would grow and rumors of the Sith would slowly reach the Jedi. Palpatine would still work to start war between the Republic and independent systems. He would find a way to create a large army, which likely would have been through the cloning technology of the Kaminoans. But the biggest variation could be the use of a donor that wasn't Jango Fett, because it was originally Dooku who recruited Jango. But there's no reason it couldn't still be Jango. So for the sake of our story, his reputation as a strong warrior is still prominent enough that Palpatine would recognize him and recruit him in his own way. As these events are taking shape, the years would pass and Anakin Skywalker would be trained as a Jedi. The environment created by Tython's seclusion from the rest of the galaxy would create a space for Anakin to grow without the same attachments he had in canon. He would still worry about his mother, but would ultimately find peace through more focused training with Qui-Gon Jinn. Obi-Wan would also grow to become a strong Jedi who became more like Qui-Gon every day. But he didn't have to get weighed down with training a youngling before he was ready. Occasionally, Anakin would train with Qui-Gon's old master, Dooku. And because of this, Anakin would steadily grow into a Jedi Knight that everyone on the Council, including Mace Windu, would confidently say is the chosen one. As the war between the Republic and independent systems raged on, the Jedi would begin to see the Republic as corrupt and join the Separatists. Having the Jedi Order on their side would give the Separatists a boost in power. But the strength of the Grand Army of the Republic would prove to be capable of handling the Separatists and the Jedi. The Republic would gain the upper hand in the war at the start. Soon though, the Jedi would begin to sense something, a disconnect between most Republic citizens and the governing authorities of the Republic. They would understand this as the Force revealing the contempt ordinary citizens had for their government, especially those outside the core worlds. In an effort to rally those citizens against the corrupt Republic, the Jedi would appeal to the citizens of the worlds they had conquered during the war. They would inspire these citizens to rebel against the Republic on a planetary basis, and then go out from there. This would be the turning of the tide in the war. And Anakin Skywalker the chosen one of the Jedi would be the poster boy of the effort against the corrupt Galactic Republic. Greatly frustrated by this, Palpatine would utilize his secret control over the Separatist droid army because, remember, he's playing both sides still. And he would attempt something similar to Order 66 by having the battle droids begin targeting the Jedi. But the battle droids are not as adept as the clones were, so the Jedi would be able to handle themselves and for the most part stay out of trouble. Because the Order was separate from the Republic, Palpatine would have a difficult time overthrowing them in the same way that he does in canon. The war would drag on for longer than 3 years because Palpatine's plan was not as finely tuned, it was not as smooth and deceptive as it was when the Jedi were so ingrained and blinded by the Republic politics. But as time went on, Jedi would inspire more and more worlds to join the independent systems, to the point where it would become known as the Alliance for Independence. Ultimately, this alliance would grow to a point where the Republic could be overwhelmed by the sheer number of other systems that were rising against it. While Palpatine's clone army was impressive, it became spread too thin across the mid and outer rim planets. Eventually, systems within the core worlds would even begin to see the corrupt nature of Palpatine and the Republic. They would also join the alliance led by this Jedi government. Though the war was orchestrated and mostly controlled by Palpatine, it quickly grew beyond his grip. This is largely because the Jedi were truly free to serve the galaxy. As the war neared an end, Palpatine would be more aggressive, sending his powerful apprentice Darth Maul to deal with key Jedi leaders. And over the course of several months, Maul would assassinate several Jedi Masters who were on the front lines, helping core worlds break free from the Republic. Now, just to give you a little picture in your head, I'm imagining like the Clone Wars arc where Anakin, Ahsoka, Rex, and Obi-Wan have to help Saw Gerrera and his people rise up against the Separatists, and they're not able to openly go to war against the Separatists in this Clone Wars arc. It's more of a guerrilla warfare kind of training and equipping them. So I'm kind of imagining that here. Anyways, little side note. In response to Palpatine's aggressive tactics, the Council on Tython would dispatch their most powerful Jedi Knights, Anakin Skywalker, along with Obi-Wan Kenobi, to confront Maul. But they would also be accompanied by Masters Dooku and Jin. This team of 4 would easily capture Maul after a short but intense duel. Maul was powerful, but he could not contend with the 4 other Jedi. Capturing Maul would shift the Jedi's attention to dealing with the Sith. Because they were not blinded by politics, the Jedi had been more aware of the dark side shrouding the Republic leaders. They did not know quite yet that Palpatine was a Sith Lord. They at least suspected that he was in league with the Sith. So with Maul captured, their next goal was to capture Palpatine and bring an end to this war. With Maul captured, the Jedi's next goal was to capture his master and bring an end to this war. Another year would pass, and the war would eventually arrive at Coruscant, with worlds like Alderaan, Naboo, Corellia, and more joining the Alliance for Independence. The clone army stood little chance against the United Worlds. While these armies fought above Coruscant's atmosphere, the same Jedi team that brought down Maul would infiltrate the city to capture Palpatine. Palpatine would be backed into a corner without many of the pieces he used to corner the Jedi Order in the original timeline. For example, Anakin would be completely loyal to the Jedi, Dooku as well. His only apprentice Maul was captured. As the Jedi strike team closes in on the Chancellor, they begin to feel the shroud of darkness that covered Palpatine, and they were beginning to put the pieces together. It was clear that the Sith had slowly infiltrated the Republic and were using its far-reaching infrastructure to ultimately become the ruling power in the galaxy. This would position them well to eliminate the Jedi in a direct manner. Fighting through some guards, the 4 Jedi would make their way to the office of Chancellor Palpatine, whom they now suspected was the Sith Lord. Now, the story could go a couple different ways here. First, in classic fan fiction fashion, we could examine what would happen if Anakin, Obi-Wan, Dooku, and Qui-Gon all fought Sidious. And don't forget, Anakin would be near his full potential on the light side. So I think if this were the scenario, Palpatine would eventually lose, perhaps be killed by Anakin, thus him fulfilling the Chosen One prophecy. And maybe along the way he would take one or two of the Jedi down, but ultimately he would lose. Second, Palpatine could escape before the Jedi got to him. One of Palpatine's greatest strengths was his ability to plan ahead and act with a wise judgment of situations. I believe that it's very possible Palpatine would recognize that he could not win in a fight against the 4 Jedi coming after him, so he would escape. In the book Labyrinth of Evil, we see that Palpatine had a secret passageway from his office to his hideout in the industrial district of Coruscant. This was so that he could sneak away at any point and conduct any business he had as Darth Sidious without anyone knowing. I believe that this scenario would greatly prolong the war because Sidious would be able to escape, regroup, and begin a new plan of attack. Perhaps he would find and train another apprentice who could help him achieve victory. Let me know in the comments below which of those scenarios you think would be the most likely. But for today's video, we're gonna go with the first option and say that the Jedi were able to move swiftly enough to cut off any chance of escape for Palpatine, and Anakin was able to kill Palpatine, Darth Sidious, and bring balance to the Force. If this video gets 300 likes, I will create an alternate ending with the second option of Sidious escaping and finding a new apprentice. No matter which option is chosen though, at this point, the Republic has lost the war. The ordinary citizens of the galaxy have risen up to defeat corruption. With Palpatine defeated, the Jedi would step in as the inspirational heroes of the war. As strange as it may sound, the clone army would lay down their arms and simply become loyal to the government that rose out of the ashes of the corrupt Old Republic. I don't think the inhibitor chip would be as big of an issue, as Palpatine did not create this army to turn on Jedi generals like he did in original canon. The Jedi would not take control of this government though, despite the pleas of many citizens. Instead, they would assist in establishing a new republic with good and honest leaders. And by this point, a young senator from Naboo had gained prominence and was well liked. Padme Amidala would become the new Chancellor of the Republic. She would certainly catch Anakin's eye, but at least for now, the Jedi Order was his primary loyalty. Under Padme's leadership, the new Republic would grow into a government that worked for the people. Many of the mid-rim and outer rim planets that were frustrated before would feel like they were supported and taken care of by this new Republic. The Jedi would remain independent, but they would maintain a close enough relationship with Padme's new Republic by sending Jedi ambassadors to serve as advisors or help when needed. Anakin Skywalker would be one of these ambassadors, as he was seen by all as the hero of the war. This would put him in frequent contact with the new Chancellor, but that's a story maybe for another time. The Jedi's choice to remain independent on Tython would be accepted by most because they still maintained a helpful posture towards this new Republic. In fact, it was much like before when the Jedi still helped the citizens of the Republic even when the Republic wasn't. Additionally, the New Republic would give each independent system a choice of whether or not they would join the New Republic. Nearly all of the core worlds rejoined, most of the mid-rim worlds would join, and there would be an increase in outer rim planets joining the Republic. With such cooperation across the galaxy, resources would abound, making it possible to develop many of these outer rim planets. The Jedi having their own government is ultimately what saved the galaxy, but it was not because their government was better. It was because the Jedi were free to follow the will of the Force and truly be guardians of peace and justice. That's exactly what Qui-Gon Jinn stood for in the original canon, and that's exactly why, perhaps, if Qui-Gon had survived, then Anakin would not have turned to the dark side and things would have gone very differently. So that's why I think if the Jedi had their own government and did not get blinded by the politics, things would have gone much differently on a grander scale. Let me know what you think of this scenario. I had a lot of fun writing this one. I tackled it a bit differently than I normally do. Usually I hyper-focus on individual characters and use a lot of dialogue to tell a story that changes smaller events. With this one, I ditched a lot of the dialogue for the most part so that I could zoom out and cover as much of the galaxy and timeline as I could. Going forwards, I'll likely incorporate a bit of both in my fanfictions. But if you made it this far and enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like. It tells YouTube that you and other people might like it. If you want to stay up to date on other videos I upload, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any other fanfictions. Finally, I love hearing your input or ideas. If you have an idea for a what if, write it out in the comments and I'll try to get to it if it's a good idea. In fact, the idea for this video came from one of you in the comments section. That's all. Enjoy the rest of your day and may the Force be with you.